Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that might sound mundane at first, the life of a medieval merchant. But trust me, by the time we're done, you'll realize these traders face dangers that would make modern extreme sports look like afternoon tea parties. We're diving deep into a world where a simple business trip could end with your throat cut in a ditch, your goods stolen, and your family left wondering why you never came home. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world as we explore these forgotten corners of human experience. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Close your eyes and imagine the smell of wood smoke and wet wool filling the air, the sound of cartwheels on cobblestone echoing through narrow streets, and the constant underlying tension of a world where death lurks around every corner. Tonight, we're stepping back to the year 1347, a time when the Black Death was just beginning to whisper across Europe, when kings fought wars that lasted generations, and when a man could make his fortune or lose his life based on a single decision to load a cart with wool and head toward foreign markets. Our story follows Thomas Aldrich, a wool merchant whose ambitions are larger than his purse, and whose survival instincts are about to be tested in ways that will either make him rich or make him dead. This isn't a tale of noble knights or royal courts. This is the story of an ordinary man attempting something extraordinary in a world designed to crush such ambitions. The medieval world doesn't care about your dreams, your family, or your desperate need to succeed. It's a grinding, relentless machine that consumes the weak and occasionally rewards the clever. Thomas is about to discover which category he belongs to. So settle in, let your breathing slow, and prepare for a journey through the muddy, dangerous, utterly fascinating reality of medieval commerce. Because what we call business today was once literally a matter of life and death. Every transaction carried the risk of bankruptcy or bloodshed. Every journey could end in fortune or funeral, and every merchant who dared to dream of something better had to be willing to risk everything they had for a chance at something they might never live to enjoy. Tonight, we follow one such merchant on one such journey, and by the time morning comes, you'll understand why medieval commerce wasn't just about moving goods from place to place. It was about the kind of courage that modern people can barely comprehend. The bells of St. Paul's Cathedral clang through the pre-dawn darkness, like the voice of God announcing Judgment Day, their bronze voices cutting through the October mist that clings to London's timber-framed buildings like a damp shroud. Thomas Aldrich jerks awake on his straw mattress, his body aching from another restless night spent calculating costs, profits, and the very real probability that he's about to make the worst decision of his life. At 35 years old, Thomas is already feeling every mile he's travelled in his 3 years as an independent trader, every night spent sleeping rough on dangerous roads, every moment of terror when hoofbeats approached from behind, and he wondered if they belonged to fellow travellers or the bandits who haunted every major trade route. His joints crack like old timber when he moves, and his back bears the permanent ache of a man who has spent too many nights on hard ground with insufficient bedding. His single room above the wool shop reeks of lanolin and damp wood, a combination that has become so familiar he barely notices it anymore. The shutters rattle against a chill wind that promises winter is coming early this year, and Thomas knows with the certainty of experience that he has perhaps one more trading run before the roads become completely impassable. Winter doesn't just make travel uncomfortable in the medieval world, it makes it lethal. Snow and ice turn already dangerous roads into death traps, where a single misstep can send a loaded cart tumbling into a ravine, where horses break legs on hidden obstacles, and where travellers freeze to death in their sleep if they can't find adequate shelter. The smart merchants complete their long-distance trading by November and spend the dark months safely indoors, counting their profits and planning for spring. But Thomas isn't one of the smart merchants, at least not in the conventional sense. He's one of the desperate ones, the ambitious ones, the kind of man who sees opportunity where others see suicide. And today, he's about to prove whether desperation and ambition are enough to overcome the countless ways the medieval world can kill you. Thomas sits up slowly, his joints protesting every movement. The fire in his small hearth has died to glowing embers during the night, and the room is barely warmer than the street outside. His breath mists in the cold air as he reaches for his clothes, the same wool tunic he's worn for 3 days, hose that have seen better decades, and a leather jerkin that bears the stains and scars of countless journeys through mud, rain, and worse. The bells of St. Paul's Cathedral clang through the pre-dawn darkness, like the voice of God announcing Judgment Day, their bronze voices cutting through the October mist that clings to London's timber-framed buildings like a damp shroud. Thomas Aldrich jerks awake on his straw mattress, his body aching from another restless night spent calculating costs, profits, and the very real probability that he's about to make the worst decision of his life. At 35 years old, Thomas is already feeling every mile he's travelled in his 3 years as an independent trader, every night spent sleeping rough on dangerous roads, every moment of terror when hoofbeats approached from behind, and he wondered if they belonged to fellow travellers or the bandits who haunted every major trade route. His joints crack like old timber when he moves, and his back bears the permanent ache of a man who has spent too many nights on hard ground with insufficient bedding. His single room above the wool shop reeks of lanolin and damp wood, a combination that has become so familiar he barely notices it anymore. The shutters rattle against a chill wind that promises winter is coming early this year, and Thomas knows with the certainty of experience that he has perhaps one more trading run before the roads become completely impassable. Winter doesn't just make travel uncomfortable in the medieval world, it makes it lethal. Snow and ice turn already dangerous roads into death traps, where a single misstep can send a loaded cart tumbling into a ravine, where horses break legs on hidden obstacles, and where travellers freeze to death in their sleep if they can't find adequate shelter. The smart merchants complete their long-distance trading by November and spend the dark months safely indoors, counting their profits and planning for spring. But Thomas isn't one of the smart merchants, at least not in the conventional sense. He's one of the desperate ones, the ambitious ones, the kind of man who sees opportunity where others see suicide. And today, he's about to prove whether desperation and ambition are enough to overcome the countless ways the medieval world can kill you. Thomas sits up slowly, his joints protesting every movement. The fire in his small hearth has died to glowing embers during the night, and the room is barely warmer than the street outside. His breath mists in the cold air as he reaches for his clothes, the same wool tunic he's worn for 3 days, hose that have seen better decades, and a leather jerkin that bears the stains and scars of countless journeys through mud, rain, and worse. His cloak looks humble enough to avoid attention from both bandits and tax collectors, but it's waterproofed with sheep fat and sewn with reinforced seams that can turn aside a casual knife thrust. Eleanor had worked on it during long winter evenings, her needle moving with the precision of someone who understands that poor stitching can mean the difference between arriving safely and dying in a ditch. Eleanor. Thomas pauses in his dressing to think about the woman who has waited for him with the patience of a saint and the practical wisdom of someone born into the merchant class. She's 22 years old, considered almost an old maid by medieval standards, but her father has allowed her to reject several suitors while waiting for Thomas to prove he can provide the kind of security that makes marriage practical rather than merely romantic. She understands the risks he takes because she's grown up around merchants and traders. She's seen men leave London with grand plans and high hopes, only to have their wives receive news weeks later that they've been found dead by the roadside, their goods scattered and their dreams buried with them in unmarked graves. But she's also seen the rewards that come to those brave enough to succeed. The merchants who return from successful trading ventures don't just bring back profit, they bring back transformation. They buy houses with stone foundations and glass windows. They join guilds that provide legal protection and social status. They become the kind of men who matter in a world where most people live and die in obscurity. Thomas wants to be one of those men. More than that, he needs to be one of those men, because the alternative isn't just continuing his current existence. It's watching that existence slowly crumble as younger, more aggressive traders take the opportunities he's too cautious to seize. The most important item in his wardrobe isn't clothing at all. It's a small iron key hanging on a leather cord around his neck, worn so close to his skin that it's taken on his body heat and the faint patina of constant contact. This key opens a strongbox hidden beneath loose floorboards in this very room, concealed with the kind of paranoid care that keeps merchants alive in a world where everyone is a potential threat. Thomas kneels by the loose floorboard and works it free with the practiced ease of someone who has performed this ritual countless times. The hiding place isn't original, every merchant has some version of it, but it's effective enough to deter casual thieves who don't have time for thorough searches. Inside the strongbox lies Thomas's entire future, converted into the cold metal reality of medieval currency. 47 silver pennies accumulated through months of careful trading, each one representing days or weeks of work and worry. 2 gold nobles that represent his most successful transactions, gleaming like tiny suns in the dim light of dawn, and a single ruby ring that belonged to his father, worth enough to buy passage home from almost anywhere in Europe, but only if he can find someone willing to trade precious stones for safe transport. It's not much by a lord's standards, but it's enough to buy quality wool, hire protection for the journey, and hopefully return to London with enough profit to buy his way into the Merchants' Guild. Guild membership means respectability, legal protection, and access to the kind of wholesale opportunities that can transform a struggling trader into a truly wealthy man. But more immediately, Guild membership means the right to marry Eleanor without her father questioning whether Thomas can provide for her properly. It means the social status that comes with belonging to an organisation that traces its authority back to royal charters and ancient privileges. It means becoming someone who matters in a world where most people are utterly disposable. Thomas has been planning this journey for months, lying awake on nights like this one and calculating every variable he can think of. The wool he's planning to purchase comes from the Yorkshire Dales, renowned throughout Europe for its exceptional quality and the premium prices it commands in Flemish markets. The sheep that produce this wool graze on hillsides where the climate and vegetation create fibres of unusual strength and fineness. But getting Yorkshire wool isn't just a matter of travelling north and making purchases. The wool trade operates through networks of relationships that have been generations in the making. Shepherds sell only to dealers they trust. Dealers sell only to merchants who can prove their reliability, and merchants succeed only if they can navigate the complex web of personal obligations, family connections, and business relationships that determine who gets access to the best goods at reasonable prices. Thomas has spent 3 years building those relationships, proving his reliability one small transaction at a time. He's paid his bills promptly, delivered goods as promised, and kept secrets that others trusted him with. Now he's ready to cash in all that accumulated goodwill for one big score that could change everything. Flemish weavers in Bruges are willing to pay 3 times the London price for Yorkshire wool, but getting it there alive and unspoiled is the challenge that has broken lesser men. The journey involves nearly 200 miles of dangerous roads, river crossings where bridges wash out regularly, customs officials whose honesty varies with their personal financial situations, and the constant threat of bandits who have elevated highway robbery to something approaching a professional art form. But Thomas has advantages that many merchants lack. He's young enough to endure the physical hardships of travel, experienced enough to recognize and avoid most dangers, and desperate enough to take risks that more established traders wouldn't consider. Most importantly, he's smart enough to know that success in medieval commerce isn't just about buying low and selling high. It's about surviving long enough to collect your profits. As he counts his coins one final time, Thomas feels the weight of decision settling on his shoulders like a lead cloak. Once he commits this money to purchasing wool, there's no turning back. Success means wealth, status, and marriage to the woman he loves. Failure means poverty, disgrace, and quite possibly death on some remote road where his bones will bleach unnoticed under foreign skies. The medieval world offers no guarantees, but it rewards those brave enough to seize opportunity when it presents itself. Today, Thomas Aldrich is going to discover whether he's brave enough, smart enough, and lucky enough to join the ranks of successful merchants who risk everything for the chance at something better. He replaces the coins in their strongbox, locks it carefully, and returns it to its hiding place. Today, he will invest almost everything he owns in Yorkshire wool. Tomorrow he will begin a journey that will either make his fortune or end his life. The choice has been made, and now all that remains is to discover what fate has in store for a wool merchant with more ambition than sense. But first, he needs to actually acquire the wool, and that means facing the organised chaos of London's wool market, where fortunes are made and lost before most people have finished their morning prayers. The wool market at Smithfield awakens before dawn like a medieval version of organised chaos, and Thomas arrives as the first merchants are setting up their stalls in the grey half-light that passes for morning in October London. The air fills with the bleating of sheep, the sharp voices of traders calling out prices in accents that span from Yorkshire dales to Welsh hillsides, and the constant undertone of haggling that forms the heartbeat of medieval commerce. But calling it merely commerce understates the life and death nature of what happens here. This isn't just buying and selling, it's warfare by other means, where victory goes to those who can judge quality instantly, negotiate prices ruthlessly, and detect deception before it proves fatal. Merchants who make mistakes in Smithfield don't just lose money, they lose everything, including sometimes their lives when creditors decide that bankruptcy isn't sufficient punishment for incompetence. Smithfield represents the raw edge of England's economy, the place where farmers become merchants, where animals become commodities, and where fortunes are made or lost based on the ability to judge quality with a glance and negotiate prices with the skill of a diplomatic envoy. The smell is overwhelming to modern sensibilities. Unwashed wool, animal waste, human sweat, and the smoke from countless small fires where vendors warm themselves and their breakfast porridge. The market operates by rules that have evolved over centuries of trade, creating a complex ecosystem where reputation matters more than royal edicts, and where a man's word is quite literally worth its weight in silver. Merchants who break agreements find themselves ostracized from the community, unable to purchase goods or secure credit, effectively ending their careers in a world where personal relationships determine commercial success. But the rules also protect those who follow them. A merchant with a solid reputation can secure credit, negotiate favourable terms, and gain access to the best goods before they're offered to less trusted buyers. The market rewards loyalty, punishes betrayal, and creates a form of rough justice that operates more efficiently than any royal court. Thomas has already identified his seller through careful reconnaissance conducted over several weeks. Edmund de Yorkshire is a grizzled shepherd who brings wool down from the northern dales twice yearly, his pack train of sturdy ponies carrying fleeces that represent months of careful animal husbandry in some of England's most challenging terrain. Edmund's wool is exceptional, but he's also shrewd enough to know its value and experienced enough to recognise desperation in a buyer's eyes. The relationship between Thomas and Edmund represents one of the medieval world's most crucial dynamics, the delicate dance between buyer and seller, where each party tries to extract maximum advantage while maintaining the goodwill necessary for future transactions. Edmund needs reliable buyers who will pay promptly and not haggle excessively. Thomas needs dependable suppliers who won't dilute their product or fail to deliver when promised. But underneath the commercial relationship lies a more complex human dynamic. Edmund sees something of his younger self in Thomas, the ambition, the willingness to take risks, the desperate hunger for something better than the hand life has dealt. Thomas sees in Edmund the kind of success he hopes to achieve, independence, respect, and the financial security that comes from mastering a difficult trade. The negotiation that follows demonstrates the complex dance of medieval commerce, where information is power and the ability to conceal your true situation can mean the difference between reasonable prices and financial ruin. Thomas approaches Edmund's stall, where bales of wool are stacked like small cottages, their creamy white surfaces seeming to glow in the dim morning light. "Edmund," Thomas calls out, his voice carefully modulated to suggest casual interest rather than desperate need. "The road's treating you well this season?" It's not small talk. Road conditions affect everything from delivery schedules to the quality of goods that arrive at market. A merchant who shows up with wool damaged by rain or mud will find his prices slashed accordingly, while one whose fleeces arrive in perfect condition can command premium rates. but it's also a way of probing for information about the dangers that lie ahead on Thomas's own planned journey. Edmund looks up from sorting fleeces, his weathered hands never pausing in their work. His fingers move with the practiced efficiency of a man who has handled thousands of fleeces and can judge quality through touch alone. The calluses on his palms are like maps of his profession, thick and yellow from years of handling rough wool, rope, and the reins of pack animals that have carried his livelihood across England's dangerous roads. "Well enough for those brave enough to travel them," he replies, his Yorkshire accent thick enough to cut with a knife. "Word is there's been bandit trouble south of Hertford. 3 merchants lost their goods and their lives just last week, found what was left of their carts burned by the roadside, bodies stripped naked and left for the crows." The information hits Thomas like a physical blow. Hertford lies directly on his planned route to Dover, and if bandits are operating there with enough confidence to kill merchants rather than simply robbing them, the entire journey becomes significantly more dangerous than he'd calculated. But Edmund isn't finished with his grim intelligence report. They're saying these aren't your usual desperate peasants turned to banditry. These are organised groups with inside information, probably ex-soldiers who know how to plan proper ambushes. They know which merchants are carrying what goods when they're travelling and what routes they're likely to take. This is how information travels in the medieval world, through casual conversation between traders who understand that knowledge shared today might save lives tomorrow. But it's also how fear spreads, and Thomas has to fight the urge to abandon his plans in the face of these new revelations about the dangers ahead. Thomas files away the warning about Hertford while examining Edmund's wool, running the fibres between his fingers to assess their quality. The fleeces are indeed beautiful, creamy white with the proper crimp that Flemish weavers prize above all else, and long enough to create the finest possible thread. Each fleece represents months of careful breeding, feeding, and protection by shepherds who understand that quality wool begins with healthy sheep and proper care. Medieval wool quality varies dramatically based on factors modern consumers never consider. The breed of sheep, their diet, the climate where they grazed, even the time of year when they were sheared, all affect the final product's value. Edmund's sheep graze on hillsides where short, tough grass creates strong fibres, while limestone in the soil adds a particular quality that experienced weavers can identify instantly. "Your wool's as fine as ever," Thomas says, continuing his examination while mentally calculating what he can afford to pay. "What are you asking this season?" 4 shillings the sack for the premium grade, 3 and 6 for the standard," Edmund replies, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who knows his product's worth. "And that's firm pricing, no haggling this year. Too many merchants have disappeared trying to reach the continent, and those that do make it are paying whatever I ask." The price announcement hits Thomas like a second blow. The cost has risen significantly since his last inquiry, probably due to the bandit troubles Edmund mentioned combined with rumours of increased demand from Flemish markets. When roads become dangerous, fewer merchants are willing to take risks, and the law of supply and demand operates as ruthlessly in 1347 as it does in any other era. But Thomas has come too far to turn back now. He spent months planning this venture, cultivating relationships and gathering intelligence. More importantly, he's already committed himself mentally and emotionally to a course of action that will either make his fortune or destroy him completely. The increased prices reflect the increased risks, Edmund continues, studying Thomas's reaction carefully. But they also reflect the increased profits for those bold enough to complete the journey. Word from Bruges is that wool prices there have doubled due to disruptions in Spanish trade routes. A merchant who can deliver quality English wool to Flemish markets stands to make more money than his father ever dreamed of. The information is both encouraging and terrifying. Higher prices in Bruges mean greater potential profits, but they also mean that Thomas's cargo will be even more attractive to bandits who have informants reporting on valuable shipments. Success becomes more rewarding and simultaneously more dangerous. Thomas counts out silver coins, feeling each one like a physical weight leaving his purse. The metal is cool and heavy in his palm, each coin representing days or weeks of careful trading and saving. 42 shillings for 12 sacks of premium wool, plus another 18 shillings for 6 sacks of standard grade. It's nearly everything he has for purchasing goods, leaving him just enough for travel expenses, bribes, and the inevitable unexpected costs that plague every long-distance journey. The transaction involves more than just exchanging money for wool. Edmund must provide documentation proving the wool's origin, important for customs officials who will examine the goods at various points along the route. Medieval bureaucracy may be primitive by modern standards, but it's thorough enough to catch merchants attempting to pass off inferior goods as premium quality. The documentation itself tells a story of medieval commerce and the efforts to prevent fraud that plague any valuable trade. Each fleece is marked with Edmund's personal seal, a guarantee of quality that carries legal weight in courts throughout England. The sacks are weighed and recorded, with the totals entered in ledgers that will be consulted if questions arise about the cargo's legitimacy. But perhaps most importantly, the transaction creates a relationship that extends beyond the immediate exchange of goods for money. Edmund now has a stake in Thomas's success, since a merchant who fails to reach his destination safely reflects poorly on the supplier's judgment. Conversely, Thomas's success will enhance Edmund's reputation and potentially lead to more favourable terms in future transactions. Loading the wool into Thomas's hired cart becomes a lesson in medieval logistics and the kind of back-breaking physical labour that merchants rarely discuss in their success stories. Each sack weighs roughly 60 pounds when properly packed, and they must be arranged like pieces of a three-dimensional puzzle to maximise cargo space while maintaining balance. The work is exhausting and requires constant attention to detail. A poorly balanced load can cause the cart to tip on uneven roads, potentially damaging valuable goods, or even killing the horse if the weight shifts suddenly. The sacks must be packed tightly enough to prevent shifting during travel, but not so tightly that the wool becomes compressed and loses value. The cart itself represents significant investment and careful planning. Built by a wheelwright in Southwark whose reputation extends throughout London's merchant community, it features iron-bound wheels that can handle rough roads without falling apart, a canvas cover designed to shed rain while allowing air circulation, and hidden compartments where small valuables can be concealed from casual inspection. The most important hidden feature is a false bottom in the main cargo area, accessible only by removing specific floorboards in a precise sequence. Thomas plans to use this space for his most valuable emergency funds and important documents, reasoning that bandits who successfully rob a wool cart will probably be satisfied with the obvious cargo and not conduct detailed searches for additional treasure. The cart horse, a sturdy mare named Bess, has made this journey twice before and knows the route as well as Thomas does. Her previous owner had used her for military transport during campaigns in Scotland, and she retains the steady temperament and strong constitution that made her valuable for carrying supplies through hostile territory. Bess shows the scars of her military service, a faded brand on her shoulder marking her as former royal property, and a slight irregularity in her gait from an old injury that doesn't affect her ability to pull loads but serves as a reminder of battles fought and survived. Thomas had purchased her from a disbanded military unit for a fraction of her actual value, recognizing that her experience and reliability made her worth far more than her appearance suggested. Military horses possess qualities that civilian animals often lack. They're accustomed to loud noises, sudden movements, and the general chaos that accompanies human conflict. These traits prove invaluable for merchant travel, where unexpected encounters with bandits, wild animals, or simply aggressive fellow travelers can cause untrained horses to panic and potentially scatter valuable cargo across the countryside. As they secure the final sack, Edmund grips Thomas's shoulder with a hand made hard by decades of outdoor work. "You're taking a hell of a risk, lad," he says, his voice carrying the weight of experience and genuine concern. "The roads are worse than they've been in years. The king's too busy with his French wars to keep proper patrols out, and every cutthroat in England knows it." The political reality behind Edmund's warning reflects one of the medieval world's most persistent problems: the conflict between royal ambitions and domestic security. Edward III's military campaigns in France have drained England's treasury and pulled soldiers away from domestic duties like road patrol and bandit suppression. Local sheriffs lack the manpower to maintain security, while the promise of easy plunder has attracted criminals from across the kingdom. Keep to the main roads where you can, Edmund advises, his eyes scanning the loaded cart with professional assessment. And if you see anyone following you for more than a mile, don't hesitate to abandon the cargo and run. Wool can be replaced. You can't. The advice is practical but devastating to contemplate. Thomas has invested almost everything he owns in this cargo, and losing it would mean financial ruin that could take years to recover from, if recovery is even possible. But Edmund's words carry the wisdom of someone who has seen ambitious merchants leave for distant markets and never return, their fate known only through stories told by the occasional survivor who chose life over profit. There's one more thing, Edmund adds, lowering his voice so that other merchants can't overhear. If you do make it to Bruges safely, be careful who you trust there. Word is that some of the missing English merchants weren't killed by bandits. They disappeared after reaching the city. The Flemish authorities are getting more aggressive about confiscating foreign goods on questionable pretexts. This final warning adds a new dimension to the dangers Thomas faces. Success in reaching Bruges with his cargo intact might represent only the beginning of his challenges rather than their resolution. Converting goods into profit in a foreign city where he has no legal protection and limited understanding of local customs could prove as dangerous as the journey itself. But there's no time for second thoughts now. The morning is advancing, and Thomas needs to complete his preparations and begin the journey while weather conditions remain favourable. Winter weather in medieval England doesn't arrive gradually. It strikes suddenly and with devastating effect on travellers caught unprepared. As Thomas guides his loaded cart away from Smithfield, he carries with him not just 18 sacks of Yorkshire wool, but the hopes and fears of everyone who has invested in his success. Edmund's reputation depends partly on Thomas's safe arrival in Bruges. Eleanor's future happiness depends on his return with enough profit to justify their marriage. And Thomas's own survival depends on his ability to navigate dangers that could kill him in dozens of different ways over the next several weeks. The medieval world is about to test every survival skill he has developed during his 3 years as a merchant, but it's also about to offer him opportunities for wealth and success that could transform not just his own life, but the lives of everyone he cares about. The question is whether he's clever enough, brave enough, and lucky enough to seize those opportunities without being destroyed by them. The journey to Bruges begins with a single step. But that step takes Thomas beyond the relative safety of London and into a world where every mile could be his last. With 18 sacks of Yorkshire wool loaded securely in his cart and Edmund's warnings still echoing in his ears, Thomas guides his heavily loaded cart away from Smithfield and through London's narrow streets toward the city gates. Each wheel rotation brings him closer to the point of no return, leaving behind the relative safety of London for the unknown dangers that await on the roads to Bruges. The sun struggles to penetrate London's perpetual haze of wood smoke and morning mist as Thomas navigates the treacherous cobblestones, slick with mud, animal waste, and the general detritus of urban existence. His cart, now worth more than many people earn in a lifetime, creaks under the weight of his entire fortune converted into wool. Bess, his sturdy mare, seems to sense the importance of this journey. Her ears are alert, her gait steady despite the heavy load behind her. The military training that shaped her early years shows in her calm response to the chaos of London's awakening streets. The shouts of vendors, the clatter of other carts, the general din of a medieval city coming to life. Thomas walks beside his cart rather than riding, both to spare Bess additional weight and to maintain better awareness of his surroundings. The lessons learned from 3 years of trading have taught him that vigilance begins the moment valuable cargo leaves its secure storage, not when the city walls disappear behind you. As they approach Bishopsgate, Thomas feels his anxiety increase. The customs process represents the first official hurdle in his journey, but more importantly, it's where his cargo will be documented and recorded, information that could find its way to the very bandits Edmund warned him about. At the gate, Thomas encounters Master William de Clare, a customs official whose fine wool cloak and soft hands mark him as someone who profits from others' risks without taking any himself. The man's examination of Thomas's cargo manifest demonstrates the thorough suspicion of someone who assumes every merchant is attempting fraud. 18 sacks of Yorkshire wool, Master William reads aloud, his nasal voice carrying years of assumed authority. Destination listed as Bruges, purpose of travel? Trade, sir. For the cloth market, Thomas replies, keeping his voice respectful while calculating the cost of this interaction in both time and silver. Export tax will be 2 shillings per sack, plus standard gate fee, plus the new security surcharge, Master William announces, consulting a scroll that Thomas suspects is updated whenever officials need additional revenue. Nearly £2 total. Thomas's heart sinks as he counts out the required coins, watching his carefully hoarded travel funds shrink before his journey has truly begun. The mathematics are brutal, nearly £2 just to leave the city with goods he's already purchased. Master William marks his manifest with an official seal and provides unsolicited advice. Road conditions are particularly dangerous this season. Wise merchants invest in proper protection. Captain Geoffrey and his men are available for hire at reasonable rates. The recommendation carries the weight of official endorsement, but Thomas recognizes it as another expense in an already costly venture. He thanks the official, but makes no commitment, reasoning that decisions about protection can wait until he's assessed the actual threats beyond London's walls. Beyond the gate, London's sprawl gives way gradually to farmland and small villages. The road transforms from cobblestone to dirt track worn smooth by centuries of use. Thomas notes the defensive preparations visible in even humble farm buildings. Narrow windows, heavy shutters, strategic positions that suggest builders understood violence could arrive without warning. By mid-morning, Thomas has covered roughly 5 miles when he encounters his first serious test. A massive oak tree blocks the main road completely. At first glance, it appears natural, perhaps storm damage, but Thomas's instincts raise alarms. The tree has been cut, not blown down. Wood chips around its base are fresh, probably a day old. This represents a classic bandit tactic: block the main road, force merchants into predictable detours, then ambush them where help won't arrive. Thomas has heard of this exact scenario from other traders. Thomas chooses a clever fourth option. He unhitches Bess and rides her alone down the detour route, leaving his cargo behind but gaining mobility to escape if necessary. It's a calculated risk. Bandits expect loaded carts, not single riders who can flee at first sign of trouble. The detour leads through a narrow valley where autumn trees create a tunnel of gold and red leaves. Through the foliage, Thomas spots 4 men around a cold campfire. Their clothes mix military cast-offs with peasant garb, weapons too fine for their apparent status. Professional criminals. Thomas strains to hear their conversation, catching fragments about a big cart they've heard about from the lookout at the bridge. Someone in his supply chain is selling information to criminals. Trust, already scarce in medieval commerce, has proven misplaced again. Returning to his cart, Thomas notices a narrow farm track leading east. Investigation reveals it leads to a manor house where an elderly groundskeeper provides both information and solution. Aye, they've been working that stretch for a fortnight. Lost 3 merchants already. Thomas chooses the alternative route, navigating narrow farm tracks with difficulty but successfully reconnecting with the main road beyond the obstacle. The incident costs precious time but confirms his suspicion that word of his cargo has spread to dangerous parties. The medieval world operates on information networks that connect every major trading centre. Thomas has become part of that network, but not by choice and not to his advantage. Every mile ahead will require constant vigilance, careful planning, and the kind of luck that keeps merchants alive in a world designed to kill them. By evening, Thomas reaches Hartford and the Red Lion Inn, a substantial establishment catering to merchants rather than simple travellers. The building represents significant investment, 2 stories of timber and stone with a stable yard that can accommodate several carts simultaneously. Warm light spills from shuttered windows, and the smell of roasting meat mingles with wood smoke. To a traveller who has spent the day dodging bandits and navigating treacherous back roads, it represents civilization and relative safety. The common room buzzes with activity that makes such establishments communication hubs of the medieval world. Thomas immediately scans faces in the firelight, cataloguing potential threats and allies with automatic caution that keeps travelling merchants alive. 2 Flemish cloth merchants sit near the fire, their expensive clothing marking them as successful international traders. A group of pilgrims bound for Canterbury huddle around a corner table, their travel-stained clothes and wooden staffs identifying them as religious rather than commercial travellers. Most concerning are 3 well-armed men drinking near the door, their clothes too fine for soldiers, too practical for nobles, mercenaries or possibly bandits scouting targets. Thomas approaches the innkeeper, Maud, whose calculating eyes suggest someone who judges guests' financial status by subtle details of clothing and posture. Room and board is 4 pence. Stable space 2 pence more. I'll need to see coin first. The price is steep but reasonable for quality establishment providing real security. Thomas counts out required silver, noting how Maud's eyes follow his movements. Word of a merchant carrying significant coin will spread through the inn within minutes. His room proves small but clean. Straw mattress on wooden frame, wash basin with actual water, shutters that close properly. Most importantly, the door has a solid bar, and the window overlooks the stable yard where he can monitor his cargo. Downstairs, the evening meal proves surprisingly good, but real value lies in information exchange. The Flemish merchants confirm the Dover route is safer than alternatives, though they warn about increased customs inspections. More encouraging are reports about wool prices in Bruges rising dramatically due to disrupted Spanish trade routes. The pilgrims provide intelligence about physical hazards ahead. The bridge over River Lee has been damaged by storms, forcing longer detours through less secure territory where bandit activity increased. Most intriguing are details from a spice merchant recently returned from Bruges. Wool prices are indeed at historic highs, but political situation has become complex and dangerous for foreign merchants. Bruges authorities are imposing new regulations requiring foreign traders to partner with local sponsors or face confiscation. As evening progresses, the well-armed men reveal themselves as mercenaries recently returned from France. Their leader, Geoffrey, offers services to merchants needing protection. His credentials seem legitimate: authentic scars, well-maintained weapons, knowledge matching other sources. Roads aren't safe for lone travellers, Geoffrey explains with authority of someone who survived dangers that killed lesser men. Bandits have grown bold with soldiers away at war. A merchant with valuable cargo should invest in proper protection. Thomas weighs costs against risks. Geoffrey's protection would consume precious silver, but alternative might be losing everything to next bandit group. Professional mercenaries offer advantages beyond fighting. They know roads, understand criminal tactics, can negotiate with bandits willing to accept partial payment rather than risk combat. Thomas listens carefully while observing other patrons' reactions. Flemish merchants treat Geoffrey with respect rather than suspicion. Innkeeper serves him quality ale without demanding payment, suggesting relationship based on repeated satisfactory interactions. Most telling is Pilgrim's comfort, despite being vulnerable, suggests these mercenaries distinguish between legitimate business and simple banditry. What would protection cost? Thomas asks carefully. 2 silver marks per man plus expenses, Geoffrey replies. Covers you to Dover and back to London if needed. The price represents a significant portion of remaining funds. The decision can wait until morning, but conversation has provided valuable intelligence about what lies ahead. Thomas wakes to rain drumming against shutters and wind howling around eaves. But it's not weather that pulled him from uneasy dreams. It's voices in the stable yard below, speaking in urgent tones too low for casual conversation. Moving to window, Thomas peers through gap in shutters at scene confirming worst fears. 3 hooded figures move through rain-soaked yard with purpose. One carries shuttered lantern, providing just enough light to navigate. They're heading directly toward his cart, with purposeful stride of people who know exactly what they seek. This isn't random theft. These men have come specifically for his cargo, prepared with tools and knowledge suggesting careful planning and inside information. The lead figure produces curved knife and begins working at ropes, securing Thomas's canvas cover with practiced efficiency. Professional thieves who know which cart contains valuable cargo. Thomas faces defining decision. He could cry out and wake in, but might result in violence, leaving him dead. Could confront thieves alone, but 3 against 1 in darkness offers poor odds. Could remain hidden, hoping they take only portion, but watching fortune disappear goes against every successful instinct. Thomas chooses 4th option, demonstrating why he's survived 3 years when others became cautionary tales. Moving silently, he retrieves crossbow from beneath mattress, weapon purchased from departing crusader but never used in anger. Loading weapon in near darkness requires skill and nerve practiced many times. Medieval crossbows democratize violence, while warbow requires years training. Crossbow makes any man deadly at close range. Through window, Thomas sees thieves examining wool by lantern light. One nods approvingly, signals others to begin loading sacks onto handcart. They work with quiet efficiency of professionals understanding success depends on speed and stealth. Thomas opens shutters just wide enough to aim, takes careful sight on man with lantern. At 20 yards, even novice can hardly miss. But killing man, even thief caught in act, brings complications worse than losing cargo. Questions from authorities, possible retaliation, moral weight of taking life for material goods. Just as Thomas steels himself to shoot, salvation arrives. Geoffrey appears in stable yard with 2 men, armed and alert, moving with purposeful stride of professional soldiers. "Stand away from that cart," Geoffrey calls with absolute authority. Now. Thieves freeze like deer hearing hunting horns. For a moment, tableau holds. 3 criminals caught, 3 armed men blocking escape, rain hissing down while Thomas watches with loaded crossbow. Then lead thief reaches for knife with desperate motion. Medieval violence, when it erupts, tends to be brief and decisive. The fight demonstrates gulf between professional soldiers and common criminals. Geoffrey's men are veterans who survived campaigns against knights trained from childhood. 3 thieves present no real challenge to men whose lives depended on combat effectiveness. Steel rings against steel, someone cries out. Then 2 thieves flee while third lies motionless in mud. Entire encounter lasts 30 seconds from challenge to flight. Thomas lowers crossbow with relief mixed with gratitude and concern about cost. Geoffrey has saved not only cargo, but possibly life, since thieves discovered often kill witnesses. Minutes later, Thomas sits with Geoffrey sharing expensive wine. Dead thief dragged away by survivors. Stable yard restored to normalcy. Inn staff learned not to ask questions about nighttime disturbances. "You'll need protection for rest of journey," Geoffrey observes, refilling Thomas's cup. "Word of your cargo has spread farther than you think. Those weren't local bandits. They knew exactly what you carried." The implication is clear and terrifying. Someone in Thomas's supply chain systematically sells information to criminals. Could be Edmund the wool seller, customs official, or even someone at inn making more money directing thieves toward wealthy guests than providing honest lodging. Trust has become impossible luxury. Thomas must assume every transaction, conversation, public appearance is observed and reported to parties whose interests oppose his survival. 2 silver marks per man, plus expenses, Geoffrey quotes rates. "We'll see you safely to Dover and back to London if needed. Includes dealing with bandits, negotiating with corrupt officials, handling any problems during travel. Price represents quarter of Thomas's remaining funds, but promises professional protection against threats he's clearly incapable of handling alone. More importantly, Jeffrey's intervention has demonstrated both competence and trustworthiness. The agreement transforms Thomas's solo venture into small military expedition. Jeffrey's men will provide not just physical protection, but intelligence about road conditions, advice about local politics, reputation that might deter casual bandits. As wine flows and fire burns lower, Thomas reflects on how dramatically his situation has changed since leaving London. What began as simple trading journey has evolved into complex operation involving intelligence gathering, tactical planning, constant calculation of risks that could prove lethal if misjudged. The journey from Hertford toward Cambridge begins as study in medieval misery. Rain falls in sheets, wind drives water horizontally, road transformed into ribbon of sucking, mud-grabbing cartwheels. Bess struggles with each step, hooves slipping on treacherous ground, offering no purchase. Jeffrey's men prove worth immediately, demonstrating professional competence, separating experienced soldiers from amateurs. They take turns walking alongside cart, ready to push when wheels bog down, scout ahead identifying worst obstacles. Their presence serves as deterrent to casual bandits preferring easy targets. By mid-morning, they encounter challenge pilgrims had warned about. Bridge over River Lee severely damaged by storms. What remains is precarious span of timber and stone that might support man on foot, but never loaded cart weighing several hundred pounds. River has swollen into brown torrent carrying trees, debris, occasional dead sheep downstream at speeds making crossing dangerous even for strong swimmers. Usual ford completely underwater, leaving limited options for continuing toward Canterbury and Dover. Jeffrey examines situation with methodical approach of someone trained solving tactical problems under pressure. Assessment characteristically blunt. Can't cross here with cart. Bridge won't hold weight. Current would sweep us away. Need another way across or turn back. Turning back represents failure. Thomas cannot contemplate. Too much invested. Too many risks taken. Too many people depending on success. But Jeffrey's assessment appears accurate. River presents barrier seemingly impossible to overcome with current resources. Investigation reveals small farmstead hidden in Oak Grove where elderly ferryman Walter operates raft capable of carrying substantial loads across river for price making Thomas wince. 5 shillings to take you across, Walter announces after studying cart and calculating risk versus opportunity. Only if river don't rise another foot. Much higher and won't risk it for any price. Price represents significant portion of remaining travel funds, but alternative is indefinite delay or complete abandonment. Neither appeals to merchant who has already invested almost everything and faces ruin if failing. Walter's ferry represents practical medieval engineering, thick oak planks lashed with rope and sealed with pitch, sturdy enough for substantial weight but flexible enough to ride current without breaking. Crossing system depends on ropes stretched across river anchored to trees on both banks. Using pulleys multiplying limited strength, Walter can pull raft while current tries sweeping downstream. Current conditions anything but normal. Rope stretches tight under pressure. Usual landmarks underwater. Raft rides lower than usual. Water sloshing over edges threatening to swamp platform entirely. Loading cart requires engineering precision and considerable courage. Raft rocks alarmingly as Bess steps aboard, eyes wide with equine terror at unfamiliar motion. Wool sacks must be redistributed, preventing load shifting. Heaviest items positioned lowering center of gravity. Jeffrey's men prove value again, using military discipline, coordinating loading process, maintaining security during vulnerable moments when everyone focused on technical challenges rather than potential threats. Experience in amphibious operations provides exactly the expertise needed for improvised crossing. Crossing becomes exercise in controlled terror testing everyone's nerve, and Walter's skill equally. Current grabs ferry immediately, spinning like leaf, threatening to sweep downstream despite Walter's desperate efforts. Raft lurches and rolls, fighting flow, water sloshing over edges, soaking everyone aboard. Halfway across, disaster nearly strikes when floating tree trunk slams ferry's side with tremendous force. Impact threatens capsize, dumping Thomas's entire fortune into muddy torrent. Geoffrey's quick thinking saves cargo and lives, throwing himself across shifting sacks, preventing them sliding overboard while men grab Ferry's side, stabilizing platform. When Ferry finally grounds on solid earth, Thomas feels aged several years, but they're across with cargo intact, no lives lost. Successful crossing demonstrates problem-solving, separating successful merchants from failed ones, but consumed precious time and money. 3 days hard travel through increasingly difficult conditions brings them to Canterbury, where cathedral spires rise above city walls like stone prayers piercing grey sky. Sight should inspire confidence. Canterbury represents civilization, law, protection from proper authorities, and established commercial systems. Instead, Thomas feels anxiety increase approaching gates. Understanding Canterbury means confronting complex guild politics governing medieval trade, with rules more intricate and potentially more dangerous than highway bandits. Every commerce aspect falls under jurisdiction of powerful merchant associations guarding privileges jealously. Canterbury Guild of Wool Merchants represents one of England's most powerful commercial organisations, influence extending far beyond city walls into international markets, where English wool commands premium prices. Agents operate in London, monitoring independent traders like Thomas, reach extending to Bruges itself and Flemish markets where fortunes made and lost. For independent merchant like Thomas to transit Canterbury with significant wool cargo without acknowledging Guild authority would be impossible and suicidal. Guild maintains watchers at every gate, customs officials reporting directly to guildmasters, legal authority to confiscate unregistered goods from traders attempting bypass. At city gates, Thomas's worst fears materialise in Master Edmund Blackwood, whose distinctive blue and gold livery identifies him as senior guild official. Presence isn't coincidental. Word of Thomas's journey has preceded him through network of informants and messengers connecting every major trading centre. Thomas Aldrich of London, Master Edmund announces, consulting wax tablet covered with names and notes suggesting systematic surveillance. Independent wool trader carrying Yorkshire fleeces bound for Bruges. You'll need to register cargo and pay required fees before entering our jurisdiction. Fees make Thomas's stomach clench with anger and despair. 3 shillings per sack for transit rights, plus protection payment supposedly guaranteeing safe passage, plus documentation fees for certificates supposedly ensuring goods aren't confiscated by Dover or Bruges authorities. For 18 sacks, total comes to nearly £4. More than skilled craftsmen earn yearly, enough to purchase small house in London's less fashionable districts, represents catastrophic drain on resources Thomas had planned for other purposes. But refusal isn't option in complex medieval commerce world. Guild possesses legal authority granted by royal charter, political connections extending to highest government levels, practical power to destroy any merchant challenging dominance. Independent traders attempting bypass often face charges of smuggling, tax evasion, creative legal interpretations, resulting complete financial ruin. Thomas pays extortionate fees while watching carefully hoarded funds evaporate. Guild official marks cargo with official seals, provides documentation supposedly guaranteeing safe passage to Dover, though Thomas wonders about actual protection value against determined bandits unimpressed by Guild credentials. Inside Canterbury's walls, Thomas encounters medieval world in crowded, chaotic, overwhelmingly sensory glory. Streets form narrow canyons between timber buildings leaning precariously over roadway, upper stories extending so far they nearly touch overhead, creating tunnel effect blocking natural light. Air thick with smells, assaulting modern sensibilities but representing normal urban life in 1347. Cooking food, unwashed humanity, animal waste, smoke from hundreds of hearth fires. Fresh bread aroma mingles with less pleasant butcher shop odours, while acrid metalworking smoke adds atmospheric contribution. Sound fills every space with constant urban commerce din. Merchants call wares in voices designed carrying over general noise. Cartwheels rumble over cobblestones with rhythmic percussion. Horses whinny and stamp while riders negotiate traffic challenging modern urban planners. Thomas secures lodging at Pilgrim's Rest, inn catering to merchants and commercial travellers rather than religious pilgrims. Establishment's security reputation comes at premium price, reflecting Canterbury's position on pilgrimage and trade routes, but protection reportedly worth expense. While cargo secured under approaching genuine safety conditions, Thomas gathers intelligence about conditions ahead. Canterbury serves as crucial hub for information flowing between London and continental Europe, inn's common room buzzing with multilingual conversation as merchants share news, warnings, opportunities. News about Bruges mixed in ways both encouraging and terrifying Thomas. Wool prices remain at historic highs due to ongoing disruptions in competing supply routes from Spain and traditional sources, suggesting cargo could yield profits beyond most optimistic projections if delivered successfully. But political tensions in Flemish territories increased dramatically, creating new dangers for foreign merchants caught between competing authorities with conflicting interests. Count of Flanders reportedly considering regulations requiring foreign traders partner with local sponsors, possibly including requirements for substantial deposits confiscated on questionable pretexts. More immediately threatening are reports of English merchants simply vanishing after arriving Bruges with valuable cargoes. Goods eventually appear at public auctions, proceeds supposedly held pending investigation of owners' whereabouts, but investigations never conclude and missing traders never seen again. Stories force Thomas confronting uncomfortable truths about international medieval commerce. Success reaching Bruges with cargo intact might represent only beginning of challenges rather than resolution. Converting goods into profit and getting that profit safely back to England could prove equally dangerous, requiring navigation of foreign legal systems operating by rules he doesn't understand. Geoffrey listens to reports with professional interest of someone whose survival always depended on accurate intelligence about changing threats. Military experience allows reading between lines of civilian accounts, identifying patterns revealing how various dangers interact and compound. Situation deteriorating faster than anticipated, Geoffrey concludes after analysing multiple information sources. Political instability in Bruges means normal commercial protections may not apply to foreign merchants. Need to alter approach accounting for threats we hadn't considered when planning journey. Assessment proves characteristically blunt and accurate. Thomas's commercial venture has evolved into something resembling diplomatic mission, requiring not just commercial acumen, but political sophistication and ability navigating foreign bureaucracies potentially actively hostile to English interests. Decision to continue toward Dover and eventually Bruges represents another calculated risk in journey, becoming series of increasingly desperate gambles. But turning back now means accepting certain failure, while pressing forward offers at least possibility of success, however remote appearing given current circumstances. As night falls over Canterbury and Thomas lies awake listening to sounds of city, never completely sleeping, he reflects on how far travelled from simple commercial transaction originally envisioned. What began as straightforward wool trading venture has become epic journey through world where commerce and warfare, diplomacy and violence, success and catastrophic failure exist in constant tension. Medieval world makes no distinction between legitimate business and armed adventure, and merchants hoping to profit from international trade must be prepared fighting for gains with same intensity, knights display pursuing glory and conquest. Thomas is learning this lesson with each mile travelled and each crisis survived, but education comes at cost, threatening to consume all potential profits before ever reaching Bruges. The departure from Canterbury dawns grey and ominous, with clouds building in the west that promise another day of medieval misery. Geoffrey's alternative route leads initially through cultivated land, where the going is relatively easy, but soon turns toward the ancient Roman road that crosses the Kent countryside, like a stone ribbon slowly being reclaimed by nature. Roman engineering, even in decay, proves superior to anything medieval England can produce. The roadbed, though cracked and overgrown in places, still provides a firm foundation that allows the cart to make good progress despite the deteriorating weather. Thomas marvels at the massive stone blocks that form the foundation. laid by engineers dead for 8 centuries but whose work still serves travellers in ways its creators never imagined. The route takes them through a landscape that seems caught between civilizations. Roman milestones still mark distances to cities that no longer exist or have been rebuilt under different names. Ancient bridges cross streams that have changed course since the stones were laid. And everywhere the forest presses in from both sides, eager to reclaim what human hands carved from the wilderness. By midday, the threatening storm arrives with medieval fury. Rain falls in sheets so heavy that visibility drops to mere yards, and the wind drives the water almost horizontally, finding every gap in clothing and cart covering. The Roman road, for all its engineering excellence, offers no shelter from the elements. Geoffrey calls a halt when it becomes clear that continuing is more dangerous than stopping. Lightning begins to crackle overhead, and the risk of being struck in the open countryside outweighs the advantages of maintaining schedule. They need shelter, and they need it quickly. Fortune favours them in the form of ruins visible through the rain, the remains of what was once a Roman villa, now little more than tumbled walls and broken columns. But the structure still offers partial protection from wind and rain, and a section of intact wall provides a windbreak where they can wait out the worst of the storm. The process of getting cart, horse and men under whatever shelter the ruins provide becomes an exercise in medieval logistics. The wool cargo must be protected from water damage at all costs. Wet wool not only loses value but becomes so heavy it can break cart axles or exhaust the horse pulling it. Canvas coverings are repositioned and reinforced with stones to prevent them from being torn away by wind. Bess, the cart horse, presents her own challenges. Horses fear lightning storms instinctively, and her panic threatens to overturn the cart or scatter the cargo across the countryside. Geoffrey's men demonstrate unexpected skill in animal handling, using techniques probably learned during military campaigns, where controlling mounts could mean the difference between successful cavalry charges and chaotic retreats. As the storm rages overhead, the group huddles in the limited shelter provided by Roman walls built to last millennia. The contrast between ancient engineering and medieval improvisation becomes starkly apparent. Where Roman architects planned for permanence, their medieval successors build for immediate need and hope their structures survive long enough to justify the investment. But the ruins offer more than just physical shelter. Hidden beneath fallen stones and centuries of accumulated debris, Geoffrey's sharp eyes spot something that makes him smile for the first time since leaving Canterbury, a cache of supplies left by previous travellers who used this shelter for the same purpose. Medieval tradition holds that travellers who find emergency shelter should leave something for those who come after, and whoever used this refuge followed the custom faithfully. Wrapped in oiled leather and hidden beneath stones are dry firewood, tinder, and even a small stock of preserved food. It's a reminder that in a world where travel is dangerous and unpredictable, survival often depends on the kindness of strangers you'll never meet. Starting a fire in the driving rain requires all of Geoffrey's military experience and considerable luck. But once achieved, the flames provide not just warmth, but a psychological boost that transforms their desperate situation into something approaching comfort. Smoke mingles with rain in the grey air, and the smell of burning wood creates a pocket of civilization in the wilderness. The enforced delay allows Thomas to conduct a thorough inspection of his cargo, something that's been impossible during days of constant travel. The news is mostly good. The wool sacks remain dry and properly secured, and the canvas coverings have held up better than expected. But he discovers that the constant jolting over rough roads has caused some bales to settle and compress, potentially affecting their value when evaluated by critical Flemish buyers. More concerning is evidence that someone has been tampering with the load. Rope knots have been retied in patterns different from his original work, and one sack shows signs of having been opened and resealed. The discovery sends a chill through Thomas that has nothing to do with the rain. Someone in their party has been examining his goods, possibly assessing their exact value for purposes he prefers not to contemplate. Geoffrey's reaction to this news is swift and decisive. He immediately questions his own men, using the direct approach that military discipline encourages. The interrogation reveals that one of the soldiers, a man named Ralph, has indeed been investigating the cargo. but for protective rather than predatory reasons. Needed to know exactly what we're guarding, Ralph explains, his scarred face earnest in the firelight. Bandits aren't fools. They scout targets carefully, and they'll have a fair idea what this cargo's worth. Better we know the same, so we can judge what kind of force they're likely to send against us. The explanation makes tactical sense, but it also reveals the magnitude of the danger they're facing. If bandits are conducting detailed reconnaissance of Thomas's cargo, the threat level has escalated far beyond casual opportunism. They're dealing with organised criminals who plan their attacks with military precision. As the storm gradually passes and afternoon fades toward evening, the group prepares to resume travel. The lost time cannot be recovered, but the enforced rest has restored both human and equine energy for the challenges ahead. More importantly, they've gained valuable intelligence about their own vulnerabilities and the likely nature of future threats. The final approach to Dover reveals the medieval world's complex relationship with authority, taxation, and the movement of goods across territorial boundaries. What modern travellers would recognise as a simple border crossing involves multiple layers of bureaucracy, each demanding payment and documentation from merchants whose only crime is attempting to engage in legitimate trade. Dover Castle looms above the port like a stone giant, its massive walls and towers serving as both fortress and customs house. The sight should be reassuring. The castle represents royal authority and the rule of law. Instead, Thomas feels his anxiety increase as they approach the final checkpoint before reaching the sea and, hopefully, passage to Bruges. The road leading to Dover's gates is crowded with travellers, but their diversity reveals the international nature of medieval trade. Flemish cloth merchants returning from English markets mix with French wine traders, German metalworkers, and Italian bankers. Each cart carries goods that represent someone's fortune, and each merchant wears the expression of a man calculating profits against increasingly complex risks. At the castle gates, Thomas encounters the most sophisticated customs operation he's yet experienced. Royal officials examine his documents with the thoroughness of men who understand that their positions depend on collecting maximum revenue for the crown. Export taxes, licensing fees, documentation charges, each item on their list represents another bite taken from Thomas's dwindling reserves. The wool export tax alone costs him 2 shillings per sack, a burden that might have been manageable earlier in his journey, but now threatens to eliminate his profit margin entirely. The officials seem to sense his desperation and take their time with each calculation, perhaps hoping to extract additional expediting fees from a merchant eager to complete his business quickly. But the real ordeal begins when the officials demand to inspect his actual cargo rather than simply accepting his manifests. This involves unpacking portions of his carefully arranged load, exposing valuable wool to potential damage while bureaucrats poke and prod to verify quality and quantity. The process takes hours and costs additional fees for inspection services. During the inspection, Thomas overhears conversations that provide crucial intelligence about conditions in Bruges. A Flemish merchant, counting losses from a recent business trip, reports that the political situation across the Channel has deteriorated significantly. New regulations require foreign merchants to partner with local sponsors, and the licensing fees have increased to levels that make small-scale trading nearly impossible. More alarming are reports of English merchants who have simply disappeared after arriving in Bruges. Their goods are eventually sold at public auction, with the proceeds supposedly held pending investigation of their owners' whereabouts. But the investigations never seem to conclude, and the missing traders are never seen again. These stories force Thomas to confront an uncomfortable truth. Even if he successfully reaches Bruges, the return journey might prove impossible. The medieval world offers no guarantees of safe passage, and merchants who venture into foreign territory do so at their own risk. Legal protections that modern traders take for granted simply don't exist for individuals operating outside their home jurisdictions. The customs process finally concludes with Thomas Poorer but officially authorised to export his wool to Bruges. The documents he receives are impressive, heavy parchment covered with seals, signatures and official terminology designed to intimidate foreign officials. Whether they'll actually provide protection remains to be seen. Dover's port reveals itself to be a microcosm of medieval international relations. English merchants eye their Flemish counterparts with professional suspicion, while French traders conduct business with elaborate courtesy that barely conceals mutual distrust. Italian bankers move between groups like diplomatic negotiators, facilitating transactions that require multiple currencies and complex credit arrangements. Finding passage to Bruges requires navigating this international maze of competing interests and languages. Ship captains demand payment in advance, usually in silver, rather than the promissory notes that facilitate land-based trade. Insurance, such as it exists, comes at rates that assume significant probability of total loss. And the captains themselves range from experienced professionals to barely competent pirates whose seamanship skills are questionable at best. Thomas eventually negotiates passage with Captain Willem van der Berg, a Flemish sailor whose ship, the St. Catherine, regularly runs cargo between Dover and Bruges. The vessel is small by modern standards, but represents sophisticated medieval technology, a single-masted cog with a deep hull designed to carry maximum cargo while remaining seaworthy in the rough waters of the English Channel. The passage fee is steep, 10 shillings for Thomas, plus another 5 shillings for his cargo space. Captain Willem also demands an additional fee for weather insurance, explaining that if storms delay the crossing, passengers must pay for extended time in port. It's another expense that Thomas can ill afford, but the alternative is waiting indefinitely for a cheaper option that might never materialise. Loading the wool onto the St. Catherine requires careful planning and considerable physical effort. The cargo must be transferred from Thomas's cart to the ship's hold using rope and pulleys operated by dock workers whose fee structure seems designed to extract maximum payment from desperate merchants. Each sack must be individually carried aboard and secured in the hold, using techniques that balance maximum cargo capacity against the need to prevent shifting during rough weather. Geoffrey and his men prepare to take their leave, their contract fulfilled now that Thomas has reached the port safely. The parting is more emotional than Thomas expected. These men have shared dangers that create bonds, transcending mere commercial relationships. Geoffrey's final advice proves characteristically practical. Trust no one in Bruges until you've completed your business and collected payment, and keep enough silver hidden to buy passage home, even if it means selling cargo at a loss. As the St. Catherine prepares to depart on the evening tide, Thomas stands at the rail watching Dover's lights fade into darkness. Behind him lies the familiar world of England, with all its dangers and difficulties, but also its predictable rules and customs. Ahead, across the dark waters of the Channel, waits Bruges and the promise of profits that could transform his life, or dangers that could end it entirely. The crossing of the English Channel proves mercifully brief, though far from comfortable. Captain Willem's expertise shows in his ability to read wind and weather, choosing a departure time that takes advantage of favourable tides and following winds. The St. Catherine makes good time across waters that have claimed countless medieval merchants and their precious cargoes. Thomas spends the voyage hunched in the limited shelter of the cargo hold, trying to keep both himself and his wool dry, while the ship pitches and rolls through swells that seem enormous to a man more accustomed to solid ground. Medieval ships offer few amenities for passengers: no private cabins, no formal meals, and certainly no protection against seasickness that leaves him retching over the rail as Dover's white cliffs disappear into morning mist. The ship itself is a testament to medieval ingenuity and the courage of men who dare to challenge the sea with nothing but wood, rope, and canvas. Every plank groans with the stress of fighting waves that could crush the vessel like kindling. Every rope stretches and strains against forces that could snap them like spider webs. And every sail billows with wind that could tear them to shreds if not properly managed by sailors who understand their craft. But the discomfort proves worthwhile when Bruges appears through the coastal haze like a vision from an illuminated manuscript. The city's spires and towers rise above walls that speak of wealth and power accumulated through centuries of international trade. Church bells ring across the water, their bronze voices carrying promises of civilization and commerce that make Thomas's heart race with anticipation and anxiety in equal measure. Bruges, in 1347, represents the pinnacle of medieval commercial achievement. The city serves as the primary link between England's wool production and Flanders' cloth manufacturing, handling trade volumes that dwarf anything London can manage. Merchants from across Europe converge here to buy, sell, and negotiate deals that will shape economic patterns for months to come. It's a place where fortunes are made and lost with equal frequency, where success and failure often depend as much on political connections as commercial acumen. The port itself demonstrates this commercial sophistication. Stone quays accommodate dozens of ships simultaneously, while sophisticated crane systems allow rapid loading and unloading of cargo. Warehouses line the waterfront, their massive timber and stone construction designed to protect valuable goods from weather, theft, and the various hazards that threaten medieval commerce. Armed guards patrol constantly, their presence a reminder that valuable goods attract dangerous attention. But Thomas's wonder at Bruges' magnificence quickly gives way to practical concerns as he encounters the city's complex entry requirements. Foreign merchants must register with local authorities, pay licensing fees, and often submit to inspections that can delay business for days or weeks. The documentation he obtained in Dover proves helpful, but insufficient. Bruges operates by its own rules, and those rules favour established traders over newcomers like Thomas. The customs house near the port buzzes with activity as officials process merchants from multiple nations. Each country maintains its own representatives, creating a diplomatic maze that requires careful navigation. Thomas finds himself directed from one office to another, each demanding additional fees and documentation, while clerks examine his papers with the suspicious attention of men who have seen every possible form of commercial fraud. The language barrier adds another layer of complexity. While many Bruges officials speak passable English, the technical terminology of medieval commerce often gets lost in translation. Misunderstandings about cargo contents, payment methods, or delivery schedules can derail negotiations before they properly begin. Thomas finds himself struggling to communicate not just his goods specifications, but his legitimate right to trade in the city. After hours of bureaucratic navigation and the payment of fees that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago, Thomas eventually secures the necessary permits and finds warehouse space for his wool in a facility owned by Master Henrik van der Meer, a Flemish merchant who specialises in English imports. Henrik's establishment represents medieval commerce at its most sophisticated, climate-controlled storage, armed guards, and detailed inventory systems that track every bale and bolt passing through his warehouses. The wool inspection that follows proves both nerve-wracking and gratifying. Flemish buyers examine Thomas's Yorkshire fleeces with the intensity of jewellers evaluating precious stones. They test fibre length with practiced fingers, assess crimp quality with expert eyes, and check for the inevitable damage that occurs during long-distance transport. Medieval wool buyers are experts whose livelihood depends on their ability to judge quality instantly and accurately. The buyer's reactions tell Thomas everything he needs to know about his cargo's value. Murmurs of approval follow careful examinations. Nodding heads suggest satisfaction with what they're seeing, and the gradually increasing intensity of their interest indicates that his worst fears, that the wool might have been damaged during transport, are proving unfounded. The verdict exceeds Thomas's most optimistic expectations. His premium fleeces are declared exceptional, suitable for the finest cloth production that will eventually grace the wardrobes of nobility across Europe. The wool's colour is praised as particularly pure, its length deemed ideal for high-quality thread, and its crimp described as perfect for the sophisticated weaving techniques that make Flemish cloth the most sought after in the world. Even his standard-grade wool receives approval for use in commercial fabrics that command good prices in international markets. What Thomas had feared might be considered inferior goods are evaluated as solid, marketable commodities that will find ready buyers among manufacturers serving the growing merchant class across Europe. But the real triumph comes when negotiations begin. The disruptions in competing supply routes that Thomas heard about in England have indeed driven prices to unprecedented levels. Flemish cloth manufacturers, desperate for quality raw materials, engage in bidding wars that push wool prices far beyond anything Thomas dared hope for when planning this journey. Master Henrik offers to purchase Thomas's entire cargo at prices that would yield nearly 400% profit over his London costs. The offer is stunning in its generosity, but it's not the only one. Other buyers, learning of the exceptional quality and limited quantity of Thomas's wool, make increasingly generous counteroffers that transform the warehouse into an impromptu auction house. For a few intoxicating hours, Thomas experiences what it feels like to be courted rather than desperate, to have buyers competing for his goods rather than dictating terms. The reversal of power dynamics is both thrilling and surreal. After weeks of being at the mercy of bandits, officials, and various other predators, he suddenly finds himself in the enviable position of choosing between multiple excellent offers. The final deal, negotiated through a combination of broken English, merchant Latin, and elaborate hand gestures, sees Thomas's wool sold for a sum that transforms him from struggling trader to successful merchant. The payment comes in a mixture of Flemish coins, promissory notes payable in London, and letters of credit that can be converted to cash at partner banks in multiple cities. The mathematical reality of his success is almost overwhelming. The 18 sacks of wool that cost him 60 shillings in London have just sold for nearly £12 in Bruges. After deducting his travel expenses, protection costs, and various fees and taxes, Thomas will return to London with enough profit to buy his way into the Merchants' Guild, purchase a proper house, and marry Eleanor, with the kind of financial security that ensures their children will grow up in comfort. But even as Thomas savours his commercial triumph, he remains aware that success in Bruges is only half the battle. He still must convert his profits into portable form and somehow transport them safely back to England. Medieval banking systems, while sophisticated for their time, remain vulnerable to political upheavals, currency devaluations, and the simple fact that a merchant carrying obvious wealth attracts every criminal within a day's travel. The next few days pass in a whirlwind of financial negotiations, currency exchanges, and the complex paperwork required to move large sums of money across international borders in an age before centralized banking. Thomas learns to navigate the intricate world of Flemish commerce, where success depends as much on understanding local customs and political relationships as it does on the quality of goods being traded. He discovers that the missing English merchants he'd heard about weren't necessarily victims of crime or political persecution. Some had simply gotten lost in the labyrinthine bureaucracy of Flemish trade regulations, their goods confiscated not through malice, but through their failure to comply with rules they didn't understand. Others had fallen victim to currency manipulations or fraudulent partnerships with local sponsors who disappeared with their investments. The lesson is clear. Success in international medieval commerce requires not just courage and quality goods, but also the kind of diplomatic skill that allows foreign merchants to navigate complex political and social systems. Thomas spends considerable time and money cultivating relationships with local officials, guild representatives, and other merchants who can provide the kind of protection and guidance that no amount of armed guards can offer. As Thomas prepares for his return journey to England, he faces challenges entirely different from those that brought him to Bruges. Instead of protecting a cart full of wool from bandits, he must now safely transport a fortune in mixed currencies, precious metals, and financial instruments across 200 miles of dangerous territory. The problem of portable wealth in the medieval world cannot be overstated. Gold and silver are heavy, obvious targets for thieves, and difficult to hide in quantities large enough to represent serious money. Letters of credit and promissory notes are lighter, but require finding banks or merchants willing to honour them, and such institutions are rare outside major commercial centres. Thomas ultimately settles on a combination approach that demonstrates the kind of practical thinking that has made him successful. Part of his profits are converted to gold nobles, English coins that will be readily accepted anywhere in his home country. Another portion goes into Flemish silver, which can be gradually exchanged during his journey, without attracting undue attention. The remainder stays in letters of credit from reputable Italian banking houses, which offer the best protection against theft but require finding the right connections to convert into usable currency. The physical challenge of concealment requires considerable ingenuity. Thomas has new clothes made by Bruges tailors, incorporating hidden pockets and compartments that can hold significant amounts of coin without creating obvious bulges or unusual weight distribution. His belt is replaced with one containing a hollow core filled with gold pieces. Even his boots are modified with false soles that can accommodate emergency funds. But perhaps most importantly, Thomas learns that his success has not gone unnoticed by the criminal networks that operate throughout the region. Successful merchants leaving Bruges are known quantities. Their presence in the city's markets, their transactions with local buyers, and their approximate wealth are matters of public record that criminal informants can easily observe and report. The decision about whether to hire protection for the return journey involves calculations even more complex than those he faced in Canterbury. Professional mercenaries in Bruges command higher fees than their English counterparts, reflecting both the international nature of the market and the greater risks involved in protecting wealthy clients. But the alternative, attempting to travel alone with a fortune that represents several years' income for most people, seems suicidal. After careful consideration and discreet inquiries among other English merchants, Thomas makes a fateful decision. Rather than hiring obvious protection that would advertise his wealth, he joins a group of Flemish traders who are themselves returning to London with valuable cargoes. The arrangement provides security through numbers while avoiding the obvious targeting that comes with hiring known mercenaries. The group that assembles for the return journey represents a cross-section of medieval international commerce. Besides Thomas, there are 2 cloth merchants carrying finished fabrics back to English markets, a spice trader with exotic goods from Mediterranean sources, and a banker's agent transporting financial documents between Bruges and London banking houses. Each member brings different skills and resources to their collective security. The cloth merchants have extensive experience with Flemish road conditions and relationships with innkeepers along the route. The spice trader carries goods that can serve as bribes or gifts to potentially hostile officials. The banker's agent has connections that can facilitate currency exchanges and provide emergency credit if needed. But perhaps most importantly, the group's diverse cargoes mean that no single commodity dominates their collective value. Bandits seeking specific types of goods will find only a portion of their target in any given cart, reducing the incentive for elaborate attacks, while increasing the likelihood that some members of the group will escape even if others are robbed. The planning sessions for their joint journey reveal the sophisticated level of intelligence gathering and tactical thinking that characterizes successful medieval commerce. Routes are chosen not just for speed or convenience, but for the political reliability of local authorities, the recent history of bandit activity, and the availability of secure lodging at appropriate intervals. Alternative routes are identified for every major segment of the journey, allowing the group to respond quickly to changed conditions or unexpected threats. Emergency procedures are established for scenarios ranging from bad weather to armed attack, with predetermined meeting points and communication methods that will allow scattered group members to reunite safely. As the day of departure approaches, Thomas reflects on how profoundly his journey has changed him. The desperate wool merchant who left London weeks ago has been transformed into a successful international trader with connections spanning 2 countries and profits that will secure his family's future for generations to come. But more than the financial success, Thomas has gained something even more valuable: the knowledge that he possesses the courage, intelligence, and determination to succeed in one of the medieval world's most dangerous professions. He has proven to himself and others that he can navigate complex political situations, overcome seemingly impossible obstacles, and emerge victorious from challenges that would have destroyed lesser men. The medieval world, for all its dangers and difficulties, has rewarded his boldness with success beyond his wildest dreams. The roads that threatened to kill him have instead carried him to fortune. The officials who sought to rob him have instead provided him with the documentation needed for legitimate trade, and the merchants who could have been competitors have instead become partners in mutual prosperity. As Thomas sits in his comfortable Bruges inn on his final night before beginning the return journey, he allows himself to imagine the life that awaits him in London. Eleanor's face when he tells her they can finally marry. The house they'll buy with stone foundations and glass windows. The children who will grow up with advantages he never had. And perhaps most satisfying of all, the respect he'll command as a member of the Merchants' Guild, a man who risked everything and won. But these are dreams for tomorrow. Tonight, in the soft glow of candlelight and the gentle warmth of a well-tended fire, there is only the quiet satisfaction of goals achieved and the peaceful anticipation of rest well earned. The medieval world may be harsh and unforgiving, but it also rewards those brave enough to risk everything for the chance at something better. The sounds of Bruges settle into the quiet rhythms of night around him. Cartwheels cease their rumbling over cobblestones as the last merchants complete their daily business. Market vendors close their stalls and count their earnings, calculating profits and losses that will determine tomorrow's strategies. Ships in the harbour rock gently at anchor, their cargo holds empty or full depending on the day's fortunes. And in inns and houses throughout the city, other merchants sleep the sleep of those who have wagered everything on the uncertain promise of medieval commerce. Some will wake to success, others to failure, but all will wake to another day in a world where fortunes can be made or lost with equal swiftness. The fire in Thomas's hearth burns lower, casting dancing shadows on walls that have witnessed countless such scenes. Merchants celebrating successful ventures, mourning failed ones, or simply resting before attempting the long road home. The flames flicker with hypnotic rhythm, each pulse of light and shadow marking another moment in the endless flow of medieval time. Thomas's thoughts drift toward home, toward Eleanor waiting in London, toward the life that his success has now made possible. But they also linger on the journey itself, the friends and enemies encountered along the way, the moments of terror and triumph that have marked his passage from desperate trader to successful merchant. The wool that carried him to fortune has been transformed into fine cloth that will grace noble courts and merchant halls across Europe. The silver coins in his hidden pockets represent not just personal success, but participation in the vast network of trade and exchange that connects medieval civilizations across thousands of miles. In the gentle warmth of the inn, with his belly full and his future secure, Thomas begins to understand something fundamental about the medieval world. Success isn't just about individual achievement. It's about survival in a system where cooperation and competition, trust and suspicion, danger and opportunity exist in constant tension. The return journey to England will bring its own challenges, but Thomas faces them with confidence, born of experience and success. He has proven himself capable of navigating the treacherous waters of international trade, and he carries with him not just wealth, but the knowledge and connections that will serve him well in future ventures. As sleep gradually claims our successful merchant, the sounds of Bruges fade into the quiet background of a city at rest. Thomas Aldrich, wool merchant of London, sleeps peacefully in Bruges, his journey complete and his future assured. In his dreams, perhaps, he walks again the dangerous roads that brought him here, but now as observer rather than participant, watching other brave souls attempt the same impossible transformation from poverty to prosperity that he has just achieved. The medieval world sleeps around him, but it never truly rests. Somewhere in the darkness, new journeys are beginning, new fortunes are being risked, and new stories are unfolding that will echo through the centuries like the bronze voices of distant bells. And so our tale ends where all good medieval stories must, with the promise that tomorrow will bring new adventures, new challenges, and new opportunities for those courageous enough to seize them. The wool merchant sleeps, but his story continues in every trader who dares to risk everything for the chance at something greater. Rest well, fellow travellers. May your own journeys, whether through medieval markets or modern dreams, bring you safely to whatever destination you seek. And may you find, as Thomas did, that the greatest treasures are often discovered not at journey's end, but in the courage required to begin the journey at all. the story fades into gentle silence, like merchants' voices growing distant in the evening air, leaving only the soft whisper of turning pages and the eternal promise that somewhere, somehow, new adventures await those brave enough to seek them. Sleep comes easily to those who have earned their rest through courage, persistence, and the willingness to risk everything for dreams that seemed impossible. The medieval world taught harsh lessons, but it also offered rewards beyond imagination for those who possessed the strength to endure its trials. In the quiet darkness of the Bruges Inn, Thomas's breathing slows and deepens, his merchant's mind finally at peace after months of constant calculation and worry. The road that brought him here was long and dangerous, filled with obstacles that would have defeated lesser men, but he persevered, adapting to each challenge, learning from every setback, and ultimately achieving the kind of success that transforms not just individual lives, but entire family legacies. Tomorrow will bring new challenges as he prepares for the journey home, but tonight belongs to rest and the satisfaction of goals achieved. The gentle sounds of a medieval city settling into sleep provide a peaceful backdrop to dreams of a future that is now within reach. And in that perfect moment between waking triumph and sleeping dreams, Thomas understands that he has become part of something larger than himself, the endless chain of human endeavour that connects past to future, dream to reality, risk to reward. His story joins the countless others that make up the great tapestry of medieval commerce, each thread essential to the strength and beauty of the whole. The candles burn down to stubs, their wax pooling on tables scarred by countless previous travellers. The fire dies to glowing coals that pulse like a slow heartbeat in the darkness. And outside, the night wind carries the scent of salt air and distant lands, promising new journeys and fresh opportunities for those brave enough to answer its call. But for now, there is only peace. The wool merchant has earned his rest, and the world can wait until morning to reveal its next set of challenges and rewards. In the gentle embrace of well-deserved sleep, Thomas Aldrich dreams of home, of love, and of the bright future that his courage has won.